Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to a new hashtag, Perfect Pairs. This is going to be a video where I share with you some of my very favorite tarot and oracle deck pairings. And what better time of year to do a video like this than right around Valentine's Day? Because whether you're single, dating, in a long-term relationship, in a polyamorous relationship, we can all appreciate, I think, a good tarot and oracle deck pairing. And I'm going to tell you right up front, I have a lot of decks to show. So grab a glass of wine, a cup of coffee, whatever is an appropriate and tasty sounding beverage for wherever you may be in the world. And let's dive into all of these decks. So in no particular order, and I have a lot to show, I'm just going to jump right in with one of my very favorite pairings. So I have here the Everyday Witch Tarot by Elizabeth Alba and Deborah Blake. This is it's a longtime favorite. It's a beautiful, beautiful deck. Really, really expressive. And one of my favorite, well, currently my absolute favorite oracle deck to pair with it is the Believe in Your Own Magic oracle deck by Amanda Lovelace. I mean, come on. Look at these decks together. They both have this really fun kind of modern but still with pointy hats kind of vibe. Sometimes the cards in either look a little more medieval, like here we have a castle and dragons. And sometimes we're straight up in the present day, like we are here, but we're not here. And I think these both play with both modern and sort of medieval life in a similar way. But beyond that, their messages read just beautifully together. So I absolutely love this pairing. And it feels like lately, like look at this. Look at this, the Tower and then Castle. It's time for healing, not war. Look at these two cards beside each other. Like, are you kidding me? This is so beautiful. So I am absolutely, look at this. I mean, I can't make this up. So I really, really love these decks together. And they are definitely one of my favorite pairings, probably of all time. Next up is another pairing that I actually fell in love with somewhat recently. I would say near the end. It was probably in December or even maybe November in 2020. And that is the gorgeous Luminous Tarot by Cedar McLeod and Luminous Spirit Press. And the beautiful Threadbound Oracle by the same creator. Gosh, these cards and these decks. Now I know that at the time I'm filming this, I know that Cedar is planning a reprint of the Luminous Tarot. And I'm hoping that when it comes back out, it will come back out in a matte cardstock to match, or even a linen to match the Threadbound Oracle. But aside from differences in cardstock, and the fact that these are made by the same creator does make them a perfect pair because, of course, the art style is incredibly cohesive. Beyond that, both of these decks do an incredible job of introducing diversity of body, type, size, age, gender. There's a lot of gender neutrality in both of these decks, which makes them wonderful when you're pairing them together. There's a lot of differences, or diversity rather, in ability. There is just a lot of really, really great energy, and these talk to each other really well. In fact, the Threadbound Oracle in general, I think, is a great all-rounder oracle deck, but paired with the Luminous Tarot, these decks just shine. And I mean, they're both incredibly spectacularly illustrated. They have so much depth and so much meaning, and they give you so much to chew on. But man, I can't imagine, like, look at these together. Even just the way the colors play off each other, the similar color palettes, like, it's perfect and beautiful. So I absolutely love these paired together. Next up is a wonderful and gentle tarot deck that I absolutely love for its encouraging energy, its sweetness, but also its like very on pointness, for lack of a better way to express it. And this is the Affirmators Tarot. And in my opinion, whenever you can match, and I mean, I think this goes without saying, but whenever you can match a tarot and oracle deck by the same creator, I think you find that there's just some really great magic. So this is the Affirmators Tarot, and it's absolutely delightful. It's got all this great animal energy, very clean and easy to read. It's got a lot of elemental energy throughout it as well. And I love pairing this with either the Affirmators Love and Relationships or the original Affirmators, which is a deck I still really, really, really love. This was the first deck by the Affirmators that I ever brought into my collection. Packaging leaves a little something to be desired because these drawers do slide around, but of course you will definitely recognize the similar art style as well as sense of humor in the writing in both of these decks as you work with them. So they do pair really, really nicely together. And I think the messages that they deliver tend to be incredibly useful, and they give you a little bit of a boost when you need one. If you are in the dumps and you need a little lift, these are great for that. And beyond that, I think they also do a really great job of chatting back and forth with one another. I mean, we have the Chariot and the Strength card here, and the messages, they synergize so beautifully. And that is what I'm looking for in a deck pairing. Now, I think that both of these also pair really well with a whole lot of other things, but I mean, it's irresistible when you put them together. Eight of Wands and Sanctuary, Two of Swords and Joy, King of Cups and Love. I mean, the Nine of Swords, but also Gratitude. And I mean, when you start to like bounce these messages back and forth and you really consider the message of both, it starts to give you this really great balance that I think is lovely. And neither deck actually shies away from difficult topics. They just both hit things head on, but do it with a little bit of lightness and a little bit of humor, and it just makes everything easier, in my opinion. Let's talk about a pairing that's a little more hard-hitting. So let me bring out my second edition El Goliath Tarot. Oh my gosh, this deck. This deck has a lot of intensity, a lot of natural energy. It's very nature inspired, obviously, very animal inspired, but it's got a depth and a magic woven into it that just makes it really special, really spectacular. I mean, come on, look at these cards. Super stunning. And I actually struggled for a long time trying to figure out a deck that would pair with this and sort of meet it kind of toe to toe, because I think a lot of Oracle decks just aren't necessarily up for the challenge that this deck in particular I think represents. And then it occurred to me to try to pair it with the Skull Garden Earthbound Oracle. And while color wise these two decks seem different, this is obviously a black and white deck or a grayscale deck, the Earthbound Oracle and this deck have an amazing conversation with each other. They both hit head on. They both have a lot of intensity to them. And they both look at all sides of nature. Neither one of these decks looks only at the, like, oh my gosh, look at this pairing with the Page of Pentacles and the Voice. Oh my gosh. The Nine of Cups with Earth. The illustration style to me even also works really, really well. Here you have the Queen of Swords with Failure. Oh my gosh. I mean, the ability for these two decks to bounce off one another, to support the reading that the other is providing and give that extra context is so, so good. And it's absolutely irresistible to me. Look at this combination. Are you kidding? You can't make this stuff up. And I just, the Shadow Self and Protect. Like, look at this. Look at, like, what can you unlock? Like, oh, it's so good. The Karmic Release, the Sacred Karmic Deer, and Permanence. Look at these two. Oh, hello? I can't. They're so, so pretty. So, really good energy match. I feel like the Earthbound Oracle is definitely up to the task of again, sort of standing toe-to-toe with the El Goliath Tarot, which, again, I think is no easy task. They're both heavy hitters, and I think this is just a fantastic, fantastic pairing. Another pairing I'm really excited to talk about is the pairing that I have with the Stretch Tarot. Now, the Stretch Tarot by Joseph Stretch is a really lovely, kind of vintagey feeling deck with a lot of it's got keywords on it, it's collagey, but it's really cool, and it's such a great reader, this deck. And I think I actually first got the idea for this pairing from Mary Grace of Mary Grace Faroon, so full credit to her, because I don't know that I had thought about that until she showed it. These two decks paired, but the Vintage Wisdom Oracle, now my Vintage Wisdom Oracle is trimmed, and I love the way it looks, and I did this really funky edging on it that I did with like a tan color, and then I went over it with like a dark vintage photo color and did just like mostly the corners. And one of my favorite deck modification like experiments of all time. I love how it turned out. But just look at these decks together. The Four of Swords and Divine Timing. Again, it's not just aesthetics, although I think the aesthetics in this case work so well. Seven of Pentacles and healing. The moon and gentle. Look at the, look, speechless. I need another sip of my wine. These are just, there's something really special about this combination of cards. And I find that whenever I pull them together, I tend to get these really intense messages. And neither, again, it's interesting to me, the Vintage Wisdom Oracle, while being a mass market Oracle deck, feels very energetically balanced. The King of Swords and Surrender. Oh, and you can also, what's really cool about pairing these two is they both feature vintage photography, and you can look at the facial expressions and the body language of the characters you see in both cards. Like, are they facing in the same direction? Are they facing away from each other? And, you know, what is the conversation between the people in these cards? Which I think is really a cool way to play with the energy. And, oh my gosh, like, look at this Knight of Pentacles and the Celebration card. There's a connection there. You can feel it. It's like a little zing. And you're like, yes, these two cards are talking to one another. Discernment and the Page of Swords. It's strength and abundance. The way that she's kind of giving this card a little bit of side eye is just fantastic. I really, really love pairing these. And I don't think I've ever paired either one of them. I could be wrong, but I don't think I've paired either one of them with anything else since discovering this pairing. It was to the point where I was like, maybe I need to get just a Peggy divided bag to put them in. But I really love their respective bags because I feel like they match the decks so well that I just haven't been able to bring myself to change the system up. But oh my gosh, these decks are like made for one another. So my thanks to Mary Grace for originally pointing out that gorgeous combination. But I love it. Love it, love it, love it so much. Now, I know I called this tag Perfect Pairs, but I'm very open about these things, and I felt like I needed to include a couple of polyamorous deck combinations. So I hope you'll play along. This first one was irresistible, and I absolutely had to talk about all of these. But this is the Joie de Vivre Tarot by Paulina Cassidy, and I will have, by the time this video goes up on my channel, I will definitely have talked more about the Joie de Vivre, and probably these other two decks as well. But I had to talk about them because, oh my gosh. So this is currently in order, so that's fine. We'll just put this in the center. And let me just show you both of the decks that I think partner beautifully with this one. So the first of these is the Spirit Song Tarot. That's what the box looks like. Oh my gosh. This has probably got to be one of the most fun. In fact, let me do it this way. One of the most fun that I've had with deck pairing in ages. The Spirit Song Tarot was one that actually I rehomed some time ago and ended up getting it back. I had missed it so much. Here they are actually paired, like they're both in order, so that's kind of interesting to see them. What I love about the Spirit Song is it brings that softer, deeper, wiser voice, and then the Joie de Vivre brings a little bit of play and a lot more action and movement, and I just feel like they balance each other so nicely. And I love the play in colors, and of course these are both decks by Paulina Cassidy, so art-wise they just look really, really beautiful together. I'm just going to stack these up, and then we're going to bring our third partner into the mix here. So the other one that works obviously really, really well with these decks is the Witchlings deck and book set by Paulina Cassidy. Again, same artist, so that is the reason I originally started playing with them together. But again, like, I mean, hello, look at how pretty they all are together. What I love is each one of these has such a different energy. The Witchlings deck brings that sort of big theme energy to the cards, as well as some like advice and a focal area. Whereas the Spirit Song and the Joie de Vivre bring more of the message. So I really enjoy working with them all together. And I will probably, like I said, have talked about this a little bit already, but in case I forgot or forget by that point, you can tell I'm filming things in a weird order. But in case I forget, what I ended up really enjoying doing was working with the Spirit Song as the anchor point for my daily reads for a month. And what I would do is I would use these two keywords. So for example, the Hermit, I would pull two cards from my Joie de Vivre based on the keywords of the Hermit. So in this case, it's contemplation and wisdom. So I would go, okay, what do I need to contemplate today? And I'd pull a card and place it on this side. And then I'd go, where do I need more wisdom today? And I would pull a card and put it on this side. And it was such a fantastic thing. But then on the weekends, I would put the Spirit Song Tarot away and I would work with these two decks together and just to pull a gentle weekend message for myself. But I mean, look at these, like the colors, the voice, it's just, they're a beautiful combination. Now I know that Paulina Cassidy has other decks as well, so you might find that you enjoy pairing different Paulina Cassidy decks, but I really loved pairing these specifically, like in this, in the way that I just described. It was just such an amazing experience, and I felt like I had everything I need between all three of these decks, and they each contributed something a little bit different to kind of change things up and make it feel fresh throughout the month. So love this combo of three together for sure. These next couple of pairings are pairings that I discovered in 2020 and just completely changed the way that I worked with the decks involved. So first of all, let's talk about the Tarot of the She. You guys know this is such a special deck, and when it came into my collection, it just sort of turned it turned a lot on its head for me as far as how I work with the tarot. This just came in and it brought something so new and fresh and different and lovely, and it's got a wildness to it, an intangibleness to it, a etherealness to it that just didn't seem to match up with anything else I had. And I really struggled. I'm like, what could possibly match with this, like energetically match with this? Oh, one of my favorite tarot cards ever, or tower cards I should say, also favorite tarot cards. I love the way that all the masks are falling away. Anyway, so I was like, what could I possibly work with beside the Tarot of the She? Now my copy, as you can see, is trimmed. I've trimmed off the sides. I think I may have trimmed a bit off the top and the bottom, and then I rounded the corners. Anyway, so I decided to try it with a deck that I'd had a really hard time bonding with over many years, and that is the Fairies Oracle by Brian Froud. Oh my gosh. Not only did these decks talk to each other in such a powerful way, but they completely changed the way that I saw the Brian Froud deck, and I actually managed to bond with this deck in a way that I didn't even think was possible. I've got reversals mixed in here because there's really powerful reversed meanings in the guidebook. Visually, I don't know that I would have ever thought to pair them, but energetically, these two decks bring so much wildness and that ethereal quality, that less tangible quality. They both bring that to the table, and so the way that they talk to one another is really helpful, and it allows me to tap into the deeper wisdom in both of those decks, because it's like they amplify each other's messages. You can feel them when I can feel them when I'm working with them in a way that I don't think I feel any of my other decks except maybe the soul cards. There's something very buzzy and electric about this combination, and I just cannot get enough of it. And again, I don't know that I would ever since discovering this combination, work with these two decks with any other. Like, I don't think I could split them up. And I think that's one of the things to me that makes a perfect pair, is when I love the combination so much that I hesitate to pair in any other way either deck. It's like, oh, no. If I'm going to work with Brian Froud's deck, I'm going to work with Emily Carding's deck. Like, I mean, that's just going to be the way it's going to be. These two are mated in a way in my collection, and I can't separate them. So that is one of the things that I think is really powerful. Now, I think I could work with either one of these alone. And there are times, actually, I have pulled this deck and not used this as the Oracle deck, but usually that's when I'm pulling this deck for clients. If I'm pulling this deck for myself, this is the Oracle deck that comes with it. And I think that's partly because I don't use the Brian Froud deck with clients, but I do use the Tarot of the She with clients, and it's been really powerful in those readings. So that is the Tarot of the She and the Brian Froud Fairies Oracle, oh, so good. Another combination that I discovered really just this year, and again at the very end of the year is when I discovered this combo. I have the Tarot of the Divine by Yoshi Yoshitani here. I adore this deck. I've talked about it a bunch. It is a stunning fairy tale deck. The stories, the cultures represented, this art style, they're all my jam. But more than that, what I love about this deck, and I've talked about this before, is the fact that if you don't know these stories, you can still read with this deck. So here we have a Baba Yaga story. I'm forgetting her name off the top of my head. And so knowing that I've read about this story, I remember some bits and pieces about that story that are really meaningful, and I can weave that in. However, if I didn't know what any of this was, character-wise on the card, I see a girl and I see these 9 flaming wands in front of a house. So if that's all I knew, I could still give an effective reading because that tells me what the meaning of the 9 of Wands is. Same with the 6 of Wands. We have this warrior-looking person who is carrying and surrounded by all these spears. It's very Rider-Waite-Smith in that way. The Tower. Death. We have everything we need to do a reading. Look at the cross swords and the 2 of swords, but there is a story also associated with this. I just think that Yoshi did an incredible job, and I'm babbling, but I just raving about this deck. Anyway, so I wasn't sure what I would ever pair with it, but I was given an opportunity to receive the Legendary Ladies Goddess deck late last year. And oh my gosh, I love these decks together. There's something about their art style that really, really works, but they also both bring story. They both bring the power of story. They both bring myth. They both bring that depth that is associated with myth. And then artistically, I also think that they really look nice together. They've both got a little bit more of, I guess, for lack of a better way to express it, and I don't know if it's the appropriate term, but they've both got kind of like a cartoon aesthetic to them, which I think makes their conversation easier because artistically they don't feel disjointed from each other. And I love the way they work. And I really like working with this deck just like one card at a time. But I also love that the Legendary Ladies has keywords. So here we have Spirit with the 5 of Coins. And I can use that as a jumping off point. Here for Hell, we have Rebirth with the King of Coins. The Morrigan for Rhythm and the Ace of Cups. So you can have a conversation, balance and strength. Domesticity and the 10 of Cups. I mean, hello, Domesticity and the 10 of Cups. Inner Beauty and the Queen of Cups. I mean, you can just pull these out and read with them together, and they will do such a beautiful, beautiful job. So while I would have never, especially from even their backs, thought of pairing these, they work so well together. Okay, let's talk about my biggest poly family in the Perfect Pairs grouping here. So I have 2 decks by Danielle Noel, the Star Child Tarot and the Moonchild Tarot. So let's take a look at these. Beautiful decks. I love them so much. Aesthetically, these decks are just, they're so special. And, oh, they're gorgeous. Okay, sorry. I'm gushing. I can't help myself. I don't know how we're going to fit all this on the table, but I'm going to do my darndest because, yeah. We're a big happy poly family over here with these 2 decks. So, of course, these pair beautifully with one another, but I tend to work with these decks separately, and then they kind of share the same pairings. So let me bring those out. The first one, and the one that I've used the longest with either of these decks, is the Work Your Light Oracle by Rebecca Campbell and Danielle Noel. Now, I will say that this is not an oracle deck I think that I would be as attached to if it weren't for how beautifully it pairs with either of these decks. I mean, when you've got, again, the same artist across all 3, something really cool and cohesive happens, and it's really, really special. Oh, we have reversals. So I was working with reversals with the Star Child. But I mean, I don't think you can really ask for better pairings most of the time when we've got the same energy that the creator brings and the same art style tapping into all the decks, or to either deck, right? I just think this is really, really stunning. Now, I will say in a pinch, I would say these 2 decks, even from both the backs as well as from the actual art, color-wise, these 2 seem to, in my opinion, work a little bit better together than these 2 do. It's kind of like the cooler tones, the pinks and the purples, they just feel like they kind of go just a little bit more on this side. So that's the Work Your Light Oracle as one pairing for those. And then there is another pairing that I discovered. So this is the Inner Star Oracle, the Magic Edition. And oh, this works really great. Again, I think if I had to choose, it fits just a bit better with the Star Child color-wise. But this deck has lots of gorgeous pinks and greens and pastels with these gorgeous white sigils on top, which the sacred geometry that features heavily in Danielle Noel's artwork, of course, ties in really, really well with. So again, I think almost these two work better together, but they definitely, when you're looking at just these two, they actually have a great conversation together, right? Like you can definitely see how they could work really beautifully, just these two. But when you see all three on the table, you're like, okay, yeah, it's tugging a little bit this way. But what I love about this is that the artwork is simple. The keywords are usually really profound and give you a lot to jump off of, especially when you're looking at the tarot as your sort of big message and then using the oracle deck to be more of the energy of a reading. And that's often what I'll do. I'll use the oracle deck as the jumping off point for my tarot reading. Most of the time when I'm doing daily tarot draws for myself, that is how I work with decks like this. But wait, there's more, because again, I feel like there's multiple pairings that I really love. So these are we're just going to consider them all one big happy family together. But another pairing that I think works really well with these decks is the Threads of Fate Oracle. And this one I feel like is really good when you need something a little heavier, a little more, a little deeper to ground these. But really, when you think about the art style of this deck, it is kind of similar in a way. Different aesthetically. We've got the gold sigils and symbols here, the much darker backgrounds. Now this is an older Shadow Edition version of the Threads of Fate, but I'm sure you can see, and I think in this case, perhaps because of the gold, it kind of leans more this direction for me with how well it pairs. I just feel like these two go really, really well together. And it works well with Star Child too, but I'm more likely to pair these two and pair this with one of the other two Oracle decks. But again, I think you can use any combination of these decks and get really powerful, beautiful readings. So that is the Star Child Tarot, the Moon Child Tarot, the Threads of Fate Oracle, the Work Your Light Oracle, and the Inner Star Oracle deck. Okay, we're down to my last two pairings, and I'm going to start with one that I've been using for a long time, and that is my pairing for This Might Hurt Tarot. So This Might Hurt, if you don't know, or if you're newer to my channel, is one of my favorite tarot decks of all time. In fact, I would venture to say that if I had to pick just one tarot deck, and that's the only one I could use forever for myself or for clients, I'd probably pick this one. As beloved as some of my other decks are to me, including my my heart and soul, the Mons Tarot. I don't know why I had so much trouble there. But this one is so universal and so much reflects the world that I live in. And I'm just very, very attached to this deck. So of course, finding a perfect pairing for it was no easy task. I'm so bonded to these images. I feel like these images speak to me in a very direct and clear way. I needed something that was going to also be able to reflect similar diversity in the cards, or at least as much as possible with the limited availability we have for these kinds of decks, right? So I wanted something that was going to be able to sit beside it and keep me in this world as much as possible, keeping in mind that this is also a very modern world in this deck. It's very much in current time, or you know, I could see this being like the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s, basically, is the best way to put it. So yeah, I really wanted something that could work beside this deck and keep me where I want to be. And so far, the best deck that I found for that is the Awakened Soul Oracle deck by Ethany Dawn. Now, this is the second edition. Yes, this is the second edition. And it is, the cards are really, really large, but I really like the way that these two decks work together. There is a part of me that wishes this was available in like a standard tarot size, because I think it would just like work better on a table for me, but I love the way that these two decks work together. I love the way that they talk together. I love that they both have that sort of modern, fresh feel, and I love that they both have a decent amount of diversity. So I feel like they can play together and keep me in the space that I want to be. I love this card, this Judgment card. It's so good. But when you really start to look at this Ace of Swords, and this is a little hard to read down here on the second edition, the Challenge card. The Ace of Swords and Challenge. Like, how cool are those together? So good. Truth and the Nine of Pentacles. I love this throat chakra symbol here. Connection and the Five of Swords. Oh. Healing and the Seven of Wands. Look at this Page of Wands and the Song card. Like, look how these look like they look like they're in the same room or in the same sort of environment, or they're sort of psychically connected, having a conversation. Like they just work very, very well together. Look at this, the Six of Cups and Treasure. I love seeing how they combine, like the Tower and Release. I mean, come on, it's so good. These two were definitely meant to be together. Haven't yet found something that I like pairing. Like, look, the Ace of Wands and Desire. Oh my gosh, I want to not stop ever, but I have to. Okay. So the Awakened Soul Oracle and This Might Hurt Tarot are just a fantastic pairing. So if you're looking for decks to pair with either of these, consider, because wow, they're both just incredible. My last pairing is one that once I discovered how these decks could work together, completely changed what I would tend to reach for when I really wanted to tap into the really deep intuition within me when I was reading for myself or for clients. In fact, the rare occasion I have had a client that I worked with over the phone or for a much lengthier session that was very organic, these were the decks that I reached for in those situations every single time, because they just allow me to tap into my intuition, hear the messages I'm supposed to hear, and nothing really seems to clutter or get in the way. So I am talking about the Luminous Void Tarot. This is a deck, I really find it so hard to describe, but it's really special. This is the Shuffle edition. I did have the original first edition where the cards were much larger, but as beautiful and as much as I loved that big deck, it was just really hard to work with the cards at that size. So the creator did reprint them in this smaller size, and oh my gosh. So if you haven't seen it, the shape is spectacular. I love this. There's something about the way that these faces in this deck run into the environment. It's a very like wet watercolory kind of looking technique where there's no precise lines. It's very cosmic. It's very, there's something about this. It's the most watery deck I've ever experienced, and it just seems to go right to those, like, it just taps right into like my psychic sense. I don't know how else to describe it. It's really, really unique. And again, I was like, what the heck am I going to pair with this deck, right? But another deck that seems to help me tap into that part of my intuition looks so beautiful next to it that I decided to try it, and together they are just a powerhouse of a pair. And that is the Roots and Wings Oracle by Kat Riles. Now, the Luminous Void Tarot is by Laura Zuspan. Now, these are both watercolor decks, and I'm just going to bring us in closer. I probably could have done that on the previous pairings, but hopefully you've been able to see the cards okay. They both keep me, how do I describe this? They both keep me just distant enough from the specifics of the people in the cards. And I think that's because both have, this one has those very like mushy faces, and this one doesn't have any faces, right? They're just like silhouette-y type creatures or figures in the deck. So I feel like the looseness, the art style, it just, the way that these two decks talk to one another and communicate the messages to me is, again, indescribable. But you can see when you see them next to each other just how like, they're so good together. They're just so good together. The Six of Discs and Inspiration. And I would say this is a tarot deck that I do not read in any way that looks like a rote fashion. I don't like read this deck based on what I know the moon means necessarily, right? I tend to read this deck very intuitively, what pops into my head at that moment. It's just like, it feels like it's a key to unlock something inside of me in a way that my soul cards does. So when I need that soul cards kind of experience, but I need it a little more contained, these are the decks that I reach for, because they give me, like, look at them. I don't know how, I feel like I've been speechless a lot through this video, but this especially, this particular combination is just, it is something else. It is something else. And I can't get enough of it. So if I'm working with this deck, this is definitely the Oracle deck that I pull. I don't think I've ever tried to pair this with anything else. Nothing that comes to mind anyways. So maybe I tried some things and they're not memorable. This is, though, the combination for these two decks for me. Now, the Roots and Wings I pair with lots of things. So this one's non-monogamous. But the Luminous Void Tarot, I always reach for Roots and Wings. So it's like the monogamy only goes one way in this particular combination. Wow, I just made that weird, but like hopefully you're with me still. So yeah, the Luminous Void, really, really special. Roots and Wings, really special. And together they're just, oh, they're incredible. All right, my friends, so those were my perfect tarot and oracle, perfect pairs, my tarot and oracle pairings, some of the ones that are real standouts. And let me tell you, I showed a lot of decks today, but it was actually hard for me to rein it in because there are so many fantastic combinations out there. So now it is your turn. If you feel like sharing either in the comments down below or in a VR here on YouTube or on Instagram, please do tag me if you do that. I would love to hear what your favorite pairings are in any way that you choose to share. Watching deck pairing videos is one of my favorite things. I love watching them. So this will just, I mean, selfishly just totally gives me an excuse to watch other deck pairing videos. And again, the time of year couldn't be more perfect for looking at this, in my opinion. Maybe it's a little cheesy, but I'm going with it because it's that time of year. So I would love to hear from you. As always, please do click the little like button if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new here. Don't forget to hit the little bell if you want to be notified of all my future videos. And of course, all of my links are down below if you want to check out ways that you can support me or the channel. I very, very much appreciate that. And as always, I hope you have a beautiful day and may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye, guys.